Well, hello and welcome to the CSS Final Project video part 2. This is a continuation of the part 1 video, and we're looking here at the grading sheet, which is kind of a good checklist guide for us as we work through the various features of this final project. And I'm going to scroll down through some of the area that we already covered, and we are right here on the general link styles. That's where we left off, having completed all of the others above it. So in this video, we'll begin from that point. We'll work from there down to navigation bar styles, general list styles, testimonial styles, and so on, as far as we can get. We also have a custom styles style sheet still to go with a few features in there. It's not nearly as major as the common one that we're working our way through right now. Now next we're going to take a look at the common.css file that we began to do some work in, and let's take a look at what we've done and where we left off. The page styles we put an example on. We worked mainly with the selectors from that point on. The selector for the header area, the selector for the headings, which involve one in common to all three headings and one for each separately. The introductory paragraph area, the copyright styles using the footer, and this is where we left off on number 6, general link styles. So that's where we're going to be doing our work. Also of note here, if you happen to be working with the CSE HTML validator Lite that I'm using here, there is an option to turn off word wrap, which makes the comments in these areas a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to opt for that. Okay, so general link styles and navigation bar styles. Let's make a clear distinction between the two. General link styles are going to affect every link. Think of it being mostly outside the navigational area. That's really our goal, is to affect links that might appear just within a paragraph somewhere or randomly throughout the website, but not those within the navigation bar. The navigation bar styles are going to be styled up separately in this section, and you might imagine that the navigation bar style link formatting would be a little bit more elaborate, a little more emphasized as far as activities go, and the general link styles would be a little bit less obvious, a little bit less outrageous in the formatting that results from them. So here's an example of the difference between the two. I have a sample site from a previous student's work, so we'll use that. This one's called Cyberpunk Dump. That's the theme. This is basically very, very similar HTML to what you're working with, and this happens to be the events page, but we're really focusing here on the links. Notice what is happening as I mouse over this navigation bar. The links are turning blue and the background is turning gray. So those are the formatting settings that are happening on the mouse over of any link. Notice that here on the events page, you can also see by looking at this navigation bar that we are on the events page because it's white. And if I go to, let's say, the home page, you'll notice the home page is white, and I still get the mouse over effect on all these. So I have a consistent approach to these links in the navigation bar. On the other hand, if I mouse over a link within the normal text, like this one here in the welcome paragraph of the home page, I don't have that same blue text with a gray background. So you can see what my goal here is, to have a more elaborate response to links in the navigation bar than we do links in the normal text area. Okay, so with that in mind, let's return back here to the actual style sheet and begin thinking about the selectors that we'd be using in these general link styles and navigation bar styles areas. First, the general ones. We're going to need as it says, to write 4 separate rules to affect all 4 link states. Okay, so before we write the selectors, let's recognize that links can be in a normal state, they can be in a visited state, they can be in a hovered state, and they can be in an active state. So we're going to have to cover all 4 of those and give different property settings that match our theme. So first, the link state. And as was the case earlier, I'm not going to give values, I'm just going to give the selectors. So link is the first, visited is the second. If a link has been visited and then you return back to that link page, you'll see that the link can take on different styling. Hover is the next one. If you're mousing over a link, it takes on that hovered state. So we saw in the previous example that when we moused over, the link got a gray background and a blue color, and that was from hover settings. And then lastly, active. If you click on a link, there's that burst of time before the page is loaded, and after you've clicked on it, that it is active. And in some browsers, when you return back to the page, it's also active as well as visited. Alright, so there's the 4. Link, visited, hover, and active. And what you would be doing here is setting different properties for each of these. Now, some properties are appropriate, some not so much. Normally, color, sometimes background color, but we want to keep this somewhat subdued and save that kind of stuff for navigation bar styles. And text decoration is often used as well. That's the underlining or overlining that links normally have. So you can play around with those properties. Others are not so good. You don't want to change things like font size and make links grow and shrink as you mouse over them, for example. It's kind of over the top and moves stuff around on the page. So that kind of stuff's not too appropriate. So go ahead and set properties that are appropriate for your theme and for your color scheme. And now let's move down to a little bit more challenging area called navigation bar styles. Now we do want to have the same 4 states affected, but we don't want to affect stuff outside the nav bar. So for a moment, let's go back and take a look at how this nav bar looks on each of our pages. This is the main area where they exist. So there's a nav tag surrounding our navigation bar. The navigation bar is actually set up as an unordered list of links. So our A tags are inside the LIs of this unordered list. Each of these also happens to have its own ID to identify what link it is in case we want to put some special styling on an individual link. And they have the normal hrefs to get to the other pages in the site, as well as the closing A and closing LI tags. So we have to keep that structure in mind as we try to write styles. So back to our style sheet now. So overall, what this means is that if we want to write a style for, let's say, link, well, now it's going to affect things outside the nav bar. So in order to make sure that it's just the nav bar's links that we're affecting, we put a nav out in front. If you recall or are aware of the way these selectors work, then this should make sense to you, because basically we're saying this will only target links that are inside a nav tag, which is exactly what we just saw that our nav bar is structured as. So all of these that we wrote before will work as long as we put a nav in front of them. So if we're being lazy here, what we could do is just go back up to the previously written styles and just kind of paste them in, and then put a nav in front of each one of those. So when you write your styles here, they will target just those links inside the navigation bar and not anything outside. Okay, so what kind of properties would you be thinking about giving there? Well, since we're inside the navigation bar, we're trying to be a little bit more emphasized about the formatting, so you can get a little wilder with some of the settings. I would recommend, for example, considering not only text colors but background colors. You can even use background images or foreground images for that matter. Text decoration we probably don't need because of the location of these navigation bars. It's pretty obvious that there are links, so probably the underlining is not necessary, whereas in the case of outside of the navbar type links, they are. You can do a lot of things. So with that in mind, go wild and enjoy some creativity in the navbar styles area. Okay, now we're not done because there's one more thing we need to consider. Use selectors like blah 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 to style the link to its own page. All right, now we saw previously when we were on a page, the link to itself should be looking different. By demonstration, the link to home here on the home page is white. If we go to the services page, the link to services on the services page is white. So you notice that each page sort of knows what link is on its own page and styles differently somehow from the style sheet. So with that in mind, we have to come up with a clever way of writing a new style that will affect the link on its own page. Okay, let's go back and look at the navigation bar structure once again. So this is the home page, and the home page has an ID of home page on the body, and the link to home in the navigation area has an ID also, and that's home link. So with a style like home page, home link, we could access that and change the A tag styling to be unique. And same can be said for all the other pages. So it's not going to be a pretty selector, but pound home page space pound or hashtag home link. That would be the home link on the home page, not the home link on any other page, just the home link on the home page. Okay, well, we want to do this for each page, so comma, and then as the suggestion here was, the events link on the events page, and so on. And so you would have a list of 6 of those, each looking like this first one and like this one, with each page identified and each link identified. That would give you one rule that affects the link that represents the page you're on. Okay, so I'll let you finish that one off. Again, you don't have to do everything that we're demonstrating here. You have some choices of what to do and what not to do. Okay, one more thing to consider about the links and navigation bar styles, and that is if you set something here in the general, it will affect your navigation bar as well unless you have a setting in here that overrides it. So for example, if we're doing colors here and somehow in here we don't mention colors at all, they will take on, since they are links after all, they will take on those styles. So if you don't want that to happen, which you probably don't in most cases, then if you set colors up here, you also want to set them down here to what you want these to be, and that way take control. All right, we have a couple other things that we need to still discuss in this navigation bar styles area, because first of all, there are some points that you can get for just styling the nav, the UL, or its LIs as needed, and have nothing to do with the links per se. So let's look at what you might do there. And I'm going to put that above everything else that I've already written. In that area, for example, you might want to take away the normal bullets that might appear to the left of your links if you don't otherwise do so. So we might think about that. We might also think about doing something with the nav area as a whole, right? The nav itself could have its own border, background, alignment, something like that. So I'll leave that as a possible selector. And then also the UL, you might want to set the list style type to none. That'll get rid of your existing bullet because it's probably not appropriate. So that would look like this. So that says, well, actually that says all ULs, so that's a little dangerous. I just want the UL inside the nav to have no list style, no bullet basically. Turn off the bullets, in other words, for the navigation bar's unordered list, but keep them for regular lists. Okay, now let's move on. We're now going to look into list styles. So we're talking now about unordered lists outside of the navigation bar. So for those, we're asked to do the following. We're setting 2 levels of bullet shapes and 2 levels of bullet images. Let's see why we're doing that. If we go to the browser and take a look at reservations, you will notice that we have unordered list inside unordered list. So we have an opportunity for 2 levels of unique bullet images as well as bullet shapes in case the images don't show up. Good idea to have a backup plan in terms of shapes, but what we really are interested in seeing are 2 images that you've set up for bullets. They need to be small images so they don't take over the line height of these text lines. And let's look into the styling that you would use for that. Let's look at the code for that page before we get into writing any further selectors. And notice that we happen to have an outer UL and an inner UL, both unordered lists. And we want the bullets on these inner ones to be unique and the ones out here to be unique. So we need to target the inner ones and target the outer ones with our selectors. And then we can give list style images to each and list style types to each in order to do the shapes and the images. Okay, so the selectors, you can actually just do UL and give list style type, list style image, and then to target the one interior list, just UL. It's the unordered list that occurs inside another UL. And again, it's list style type and list style image that you want to set for both. For list style types, you have like disk, square, circle, so on. The images would be your own. Moving down, the next one is testimonial styles. Now, testimonial styles are a little bit more involved than, let's say, footer styles because of the structure that you have to be aware of. 4 rules are required to style at least these 4 items: the surrounding testimonials, the 3 testimonial divs, the quotes, and the speakers. Let's go to any of our pages and take a look at the code there. Every page shares this same structure. There's an article that has an outer ID of testimonials. There's an H3 inside, by the way. Then there are 3 separate divs internal to that with the class of testimonial. You can see the second and third ones there. And then inside of each of those is a paragraph with a class of quote, followed by a paragraph with class of speaker. The quote is what the person's saying, and the speaker is just the person's name. So that structure is intact on every page, and so we have an opportunity to consistently style the testimonial areas just by using some carefully chosen selectors based on these IDs and classes. So let's go back to our style sheet and come up with some of those selectors. So the surrounding testimonials area itself would be a hashtag testimonials. The testimonial inside would be a dot testimonial because it is a class. There are 3 of them per page. And then we have to also address speaker and quote. And those are also classes, since there are 3 of them on this page and in every other page. So dot quote and dot speaker. So those are your selectors. By the way, do not go in there and change any of those classes or IDs. Leave them intact so that when I'm grading, I can recognize your selectors. The order of the selectors aren't that important, but they should be in the right section and they should have the right names. Okay, so that will give you an opportunity. Just by way of example, if we check out this site and we look at the testimonial area, you can see, for example, that this area has different styling on the quote versus the speaker in terms of colors. We also have each testimonial has been given a white background, rounded corners, and the overall testimonial is given a black background, and that's the overall area behind it. So we can see that consistently as we go from page to page. You see that the styling on there is consistent coming through every page. So that's the goal. Let's get back to our style sheet and move down into the next section called logo positioning styles. This one's a little strange, so let's give it its due. It's going to give us an opportunity to see how we can position something on a page wherever we want to put it, regardless of where it appears in the HTML. And that's called absolute positioning. And we're going to be absolutely positioning an image that appears down towards the bottom of every page, and we're going to be positioning it back up to the top in an area that works for us. It's going to be a logo, and it's going to be used as a background image. That all sounds kind of strange, probably, and it is. We're kind of flexing our HTML muscles here to do something that might actually be easier to just do in HTML, but we want to explore this new positioning property. So I'm just opening up any one of our 6 pages here, and I'm going to scroll down to the very, very bottom, and you'll see that every page has a special div right before the closing body tag called Position Me. That's the ID on it. And it's actually a completely empty div. As you can see, there's nothing inside that div. So what on earth are we doing with this? Okay, so for this Position Me div, we need to find a logo image or create a logo image for the background of that div. So step 1 is to have a logo. Either maybe you've already created it, but I'll demonstrate how you could create one pretty quickly. First of all, we're going to go back to Blackboard, and if you go to the assignments page, one of the links here will, in the final project area, will take us to a handout on creating logos and buttons. By the way, you can use some of these tools to build button images for your navigation bar if you choose to do it that way. But right now we're focused on going to one of these website tools to create a logo. I'll choose this one. You can go to any site you want to, or if you have Photoshop or other graphics capabilities, you can create one from scratch yourself. The logo should have the name of your hotel on it. So for example, go to this label maker website, we can play around with its particular options to try to create a logo for our hotel site. First of all, you type in the text in this particular website. So if the name of my hotel is whatever, then that'll be my text. Yours would be whatever your hotel is called. And then you can choose colors for the text and the background, or you can just keep the background transparent and then it would pick up the background on the page itself. That's what I'll do here. I'll choose a blue text, and then you can choose some effects or filters. Most of these websites have some kind of filtering or effects to choose from, and it's hard to tell what they do exactly except to just try them out. I'll choose slant. No doubt that'll put the text at an angle. I'll choose shadow to put some kind of shadowing effect on it, and you can just choose as many or as few of those effects as you like, and then you can make your label. This one doesn't seem to give me much control over the size of it. Some do. At any rate, here's my whatever hotel logo. Not terribly exciting, but whatever it turns out to be. So once it's created, you should be able to right-click it and choose Save Image As. And then you would want to save it into the folder that contains the rest of your site's pages and images. And in my case, that will be on the desktop. And you probably want to change the name because they are going to give it their own crazy name, which isn't going to be too appropriate for you. So I'll just call it hotel-logo. It'll take on its own .gif or .jpeg extension, .gif in this case, and we can now return to our website pages and get back to the business of trying to position this image as a background now. So the goal is to put that image as a background to this div, And we would not do that in the HTML. We're going to do this completely in the CSS. The issue, if you try to use it as a background, is that since there's nothing in the div has no space, and it will not then show any background. So we have to set, in the CSS, we have to set some kind of height and width to it, as it's indicated here. Give it a width and a height. And you want to give that width and height to match the size of the image itself. So first of all, let's get the selector in there. It's going to have to be hashtag position me, because that's the name of the ID. And some of your settings now will be different from mine based on your image, but these are some of the things I'm going to want to set. I'm going to want to set a background, in particular a background image, and we'll fill that in later. I'm going to want to set a width and a height, and eventually positioning properties as well. Let's first just do this much. So the background image is going to be done with this format, URL with the file name inside, and my file name, yours might be different, but my file name is logo.gif, and then semicolon. And offhand, at the moment, I don't know the width and height. I'll have to discover that. But for now, just so we can see something and make sure it's working, I'm just going to make it 100 by 100. Now recognize that if the image is smaller than that, it's going to repeat by default. And if it's bigger than that, then I'm just going to be seeing a portion of it. And it's going to be down at the bottom of the page because that's where the div is. But later we'll position it back up to where it might make sense. So I'm going to save that. And now we're going to view that in the browser and see. So here's the previous page. You can see the bullets are no longer on the nav bar, but more importantly, there's our whatever hotel logo, and it is repeating vertically because 100 pixels is bigger height-wise than the image itself. So I need to explore exactly the size of that, so we'll know what to set the height and width to match it exactly, because we really don't want it to repeat. So let me go back now to the folder that holds those files. And depending on your particular operating system, it may or may not give you those dimensions. You may have to right-click on the file and explore it further or whatever. But I can see clearly here that my dimensions are 270 by 24, 270 wide by 24 pixels high. So I want to come back now into my editor and set those. So 270 wide by 24 high. And save. And come back to the browser and refresh. Okay, now you see the desired result, which is to have that image appearing once and once only. Now, unfortunately, it's positioned at the bottom of the page, and it's not doing me much good there because it is a logo, and I prefer it instead to be up at the top somewhere. And furthermore, I want it at the top of every page, and right now it's at the bottom of every page, as you can see. So now we got to get into the positioning, and notice that it really should go up in that banner area, but the problem is the banner area, there's not much room up here. We don't have a lot of space above that H1, although we can create it with some padding possibly, but we do have a lot of space on the right hand side. So that's maybe one good place to put it. Let's go back to our code and in fact scroll up into some of those earlier settings that we did for body and for the header area, and we can see that if we look closely, we had a 10% margin setting on the right hand side of the page, and so that gives us some idea of where we could place that background on the div. Actually, we're placing the div, which happens to have a background. So we could use that 10% as the right edge for that as well if we wanted to. So back down to the logo positioning. So what I'm saying here is that we can set properties here for top or bottom and left or right to position it where we want. If we want it towards the top of the page, then probably we'll use top, and we'll give some physical space amount down from the top of the page, maybe 25 pixels, let's just say. This can all be tweaked, so choose your particular settings as you like. And normally we would do left or right, and depending on where it's going to be close to. So this is going to be based on the right edge, and I want to go 10%, so the right edge of the div and therefore background logo will be right up against the right margin of the rest of the page. Should line up nicely with it. So those settings are in place, but I have to set the positioning itself. Now for the top and right settings to really work, you have to have the positioning set to absolute. So these kind of work together, and we'll hopefully take that background image for the div. Actually, it's just moving the div. The background image comes with it into the right place on the right hand side. So we're going to save that, go back to the browser, refresh, and lo and behold, there we have it. Okay, now it is pretty much lining up on the right hand side the way we want it. It may not be lining up the way we want it here. Maybe we want to drop the events down a little bit. So the events is part of the H1 banner area. So if you wanted to drop that down just to see how that could be done, we go back up to that banner area, which is number 2 in the order of items, and maybe set some padding to the top of it to move it down. You could use margin as well. And I don't know what's appropriate here, but 50 pixels would do the job since that logo is only about 20 something pixels high itself. That should move it down enough. And back to the browser, refresh that, and you can see now this is a more prominent logo with this down further. Now normally this would be a bigger size than that, but I haven't set font sizes on things, and we can manipulate this too. Even though it's a background image, you have sizing capabilities on it as well. So that gives you the idea of what to do with that background positioning item. And we're down now to just the last item here, which is multi-column layout styles. For that, we're looking for 2 columns, 3 columns, whatever you like, something other than the default layout, which is going to just be 1 column. You can use your multi-column layout styles that were given to you as part of your assignment 3 hotel part, but for full credit you're going to go to Blackboard. We have a link down here for the layout styles. It's the layout guide, and this guide shows you some alternative layouts. You can have the links on the left and the rest of the stuff on the right in a 2-column manner. You can have the navigation bar and the testimonials on the left and the rest of the main content on the right. Or you could have a setup where the testimonials are on the right and the navigation bar is across the top and the rest of the content's there. So, you have some options, and in each case the code is given to you in a screenshot, and you can just type it in, and that typing would go into this section here to get those points. Anything else that you want to set and you don't know where to put it, you can always put it down here in this miscellaneous styles area. But keep in mind, any section here that is left blank will receive no points. And by the way, this is considered blank. Just having selectors with no properties doesn't work. You need to set those properties. I'm just giving you the selectors as a starting point. Okay, so that concludes basically everything here for the common.css style sheet file. The only thing left will be the custom sheet, and that's the end of part 2.